Great. Thanks everyone for those great introductions, and we're excited to hear more. I know you shared a little bit about what you're up to these days, but if you can talk a little bit about what you do in your role now, along with some of the impactful experiences, classes, things that you did while in undergrad that led you to consider and also pursue your current field. And we'll start with Mark.
So one of the most, I would say, impactful experiences I had was my summer internships when I was an undergrad. And it was, I was a rising junior, and I did an internship in Washington, D.C. in the Senate, and was an intern for a Senate policy committee. And I was working for the general counsel of the committee and doing research to help him write a legal brief for a case that was coming up before the Supreme Court. And it really changed my whole kind of career path thought. And I decided actually that summer, I want to go to law school. And so I started studying for the LSAT when I went back to school in the fall, and took the LSATs and applied to law school. And that's where I went right after I graduated. So I think from my experience, kind of leveraging the, kind of your academic work and finding internship opportunities in areas of interest for you was something that was really important and actually had a pretty significant impact on my career path.
So I found my way into philanthropy not linear at all. I think one of the most impactful experiences at Northwestern was the opportunity to dive into lots of different research, to think critically, analytically, to be exposed to people from around the world. I think that was the real treasure of Northwestern. And so when I graduated, I thought seriously about, do I keep studying? Like, I love this so much, or is it time for a break? And so I was chatting with my mentor yesterday, and I asked, what's the most important thing that you would want me to share? And my mentor said, that the importance of taking that breath. You've just done this really rigorous, wonderful journey to get you to and then through Northwestern. And so that pause moment. And for me, that landed me in in New Zealand, another N, and traveling for a few years. And so the importance for me to really just kind of take a pause, which could be a summer internship, it could be 3 years traveling the globe, and then finding yourself back, more clear on what your goals, what you enjoy, what excites you after kind of taking that pause. And that's how I came back and decided I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector. And again, not linear at all, very circuitous. I ended up in philanthropy and have found so much joy in not being on the front lines as a nonprofit worker, but helping and supporting through the research I do, through the data analysis, through a lot of the background, nuts and bolts work that has to happen to make funding successful, to kind of meet the goals that we want to meet, is where I am. And so there's still a lot of research and analysis and critical thinking. And it's in a space that I couldn't have imagined without kind of taking that pause and getting real clear on, what do I want out of my professional journey.
So I think for my answer, perhaps I'll just start with, what I'm doing right now and the role that I fulfill in my company. And it's a hybrid of a key account management role as well as a business development role. And, my day-to-day is really understanding a diverse set of clients and relationships that I have that all have different needs and goals, and how I can augment or, vary my approach to each of them to fit exactly what they need through using the product that I work on, and, the company that I work with. And so it's constantly evolving, and it's constantly challenging me to think from somebody else's viewpoint and perspective. And the common thread that I'm connecting that to when I connect it to my experience at Northwestern was, even though, I was pretty focused on history and English lit, but those are broad categories of academic, progression, right? My classes varied greatly from, extremely contemporary to, medieval literature. I mean, it was all over the place in terms of the classes that I took. And I think what allowed me to get from my time at Northwestern to where I am now and being successful in what I do is the ability to really sort of think flexibly, and to jump into a new situation with an open mind, with an empathetic viewpoint, and to understand that, I might not know what I need to know about something off the bat, right? Like I'm never gonna, jump into something and have the answer right away. But if you listen and you understand, you ask the right questions and you create relationships, you can really sort of get to that point. And I think it started with, the types of courses that I was taking at Northwestern, and starting from the point of starting a course to, my final paper, really coming around to understanding the subject was such great training for me to, how I apply my day-to-day and what I do right now.
I like, sounds like it's a theme of not having a direct path. I was a first generation, or I am, I guess, a first generation college student. In the summers, I went home to work so I could, help my family. And my junior year, though, I had an opportunity to get a summer research grant. I can't remember who it was with, somebody through Northwestern, and then did my research for my senior thesis. And it was then that I looked up and thought, oh, this whole ideas thing, like I can have a question and spend time exploring it, and from this really interdisciplinary way. And that served me well. I ended up teaching I was a teacher after school, after graduation, but I had this nagging curiosity just about the world. And I remember I read an article in The Nation about chicken processing plants and how they were changing racially from predominantly Black workforce and white workforce to a predominantly Latino workforce. This is 20-some years ago. And I thought that was fascinating. And so I decided to apply to graduate school. Again, I didn't know anybody who would apply to graduate school. I didn't know what I would be doing with this, but I had a curiosity, I had a question that was really, I think, supported in my development as an American Studies major to just explore. And so I, wrote this grant application and ended up going to graduate school. I got my PhD 2011. And then I thought I was going to go on this whole academic path. I was going to be, got a job at University of Pennsylvania. And then I turned it down because I had an opportunity to go into policy. I mean, a complete 180. I was the worst grad student because I could never remember theorists or who said what. I just loved the ideas. Anyway, took a totally different path, ended up in state government, created a state agency, kind of did startup and government. And then I'm now work in DC, but really just being open to opportunities and having that that encouragement to explore ideas was really foundational for my career.
That's really helpful, Myra. Thanks for talking through some of the steps and everyone's answers on those impactful experiences. And a few of you mentioned, the first job you had after school. I really want to dive into that first job after graduation, because our students on the line are thinking, to hear what you're up to now, but they're most concerned with the first job after school and making sure that's going to put them on the right path, et cetera. And can you tell us a little bit more about your first job post-graduation, and, was it your plan A, and how did you go about strategizing in your career from that point? And Myra, we'll start with you for this one.
So I taught middle school, 7th grade middle school social studies at a school in Roxbury, Massachusetts. I went and followed a guy, I'll be totally honest, my now husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, he's 4 years older than I am. He went off to graduate school and I followed. We had separate apartments, I lived my separate life. But anyway, this is appropriate for you guys. So I went in, had no teaching experience. I'd interned for an urban education class and volunteered at Northwestern. And I sat down with the principal. It turned out he played football for BU, and his best game ever was against Northwestern. I literally sat for an interview and had him relive his glory days, and that's how I got the job. I kid you not. I was 21 and I was teaching a bunch of 7th graders who were really close in age to me, really. So yeah, that was my first job. And then we moved to Miami, and I taught, and I worked at Best Buddies for a year in high school, so I was still interested in education. And then I taught AP US history for a couple of years at a private school in Miami, and then I went up to graduate school. Did I answer all your questions, Cassie?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know you're doing something different now. When you left teaching, were you going to grad school to make that pivot, or yeah?
I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I mean, I had no model for this. I come from, like I said, a very working class background, and I just had a question that I wanted answered. I honestly, that is the truth. And so I guess I would become a professor. And then, as I said earlier, I just decided to completely make a hard pivot away from that. I'm impatient. I really have a desire to see change, and I worry that, you know, having 5 people read my book would not get the kind of change that I wanted to see in the world. So while I appreciate people going to academia, I really had a sense of urgency that I needed to exercise.
I think it's back to me now. So I felt a lot of pressure to have a track, just because of my family pressure. My friends all seemed to, I had engineering friends. I had friends that were absolutely going to law school. I had friends that were absolutely going into finance, and they were knocking down their to-do list to get to those points. And I always felt a little lost when it came to that during my undergrad experience, and it was a point of insecurity for me, honestly. So I felt pressure to find a track. So I was just, okay, what do I like? What am I studying? What am I doing? Okay, politics. That's it. That's what I have to do. So my first job was interning on the Hill in DC. I threw out just tons and tons of applications to all sorts of members of Congress all across the country, and actually heard back about an internship while I was on spring break in Las Vegas at like 9 o'clock in the morning. I had not gotten much sleep the night before. And I had finished all of my classes after winter quarter. I was planning on actually working at Al's Deli, and I was planning on just hanging out and relaxing with my friends, and just like making the most of senior spring. And I got a call that said, "Are you available to come start a spring internship next week?" And so I was like, "Oh man, all right." And I, called my dad. I was like, "I don't know. I guess." And my dad's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, of course you have to. You're going. You just go." So I left. My friends were like, called me like when school was starting. They're like, "Where are you?" And I started my internship then, and that started down a little sort of mini career path that I thought was going to be my path, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, but it ended up not being my path, and it was a scary realization that that wasn't what I wanted to do. And there was a couple of things that I had to sort of get over in terms of my own personal fears and insecurities in order to make a decision to veer from that path. At the end of the day, that sort of mindset has instilled how I view my career path now. Was it always the right thing to do? No, I definitely made some wrong turns along the way. But I do think that realizing that something isn't for you is really important, and having the courage to sort of act on it. And Myra was talking about changing career paths as well, and I'm sure we all have that experience. Just because if you set up, you're all at this Zoom meeting right now because you're thinking about the fact that perhaps it's less traditional. You don't have a direct path in mind, and I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely okay. And it took me a while to realize that. So definitely want to impart that message for sure.
As we're going, the Northwestern researcher always, I'm trying to look for threads and themes here that we can kind of elevate. And I think one difference I will share is Patton was saying, he felt pressure to find a track. And a really pivotal moment for me was as I was trying to figure out what was next, and I was researching grad schools, and I already had a part-time job in the corporate world. I realized I wasn't feeling fulfilled by any of it. And so for me, a conversation with one of my dear Northwestern friends who had graduated a couple years earlier and had gone on to grad school said, do what excites you. You know, you're 22 years old. Do what you want to do at this moment. You know, there's no next step. And I feel, you know, as a type A, I was so determined to figure out like what is the next right thing. And then I was kind of given permission to just explore. And that's, I mean, I found out I could get a work study and go to New Zealand or work travel. And it was really kind of a leap. And so having dabbled in research and having dabbled in the corporate world, I think I really felt like I just needed to take a minute to figure out what I wanted to do. Because once you're in it, you're in it. I mean, now I have a house and I have 2 kids and I can't switch sectors as easily. But where you are right now, you can try something and, you know, much like Patton just said, and realize it just doesn't work. It doesn't inspire you. It doesn't excite you. If you are sitting in a cubicle and you don't want to be there, figure out what the other options are and start working towards that. And my first job, when I came back from traveling, I knew at that point, I don't want to go back to corporate. Like there were reasons that it just didn't appeal to me. And I was looking at nonprofits. Unlike Myra, I didn't have, you know, this question and this passion. So picking a nonprofit was really hard. Like, I don't want to save the whales. You know, that's not what is going to get me up every morning, but I want to help other people do that. And so that's how I found my way to philanthropy. And right now I'm working at an organization that supports conservation and social justice. And it's incredible. Like, I couldn't be more passionate about my job. And then because of the sector I'm in, there aren't the same kind of financial crunch feelings that you get at a nonprofit. And there's not the same kind of bottom line measurements that happen in the corporate world. So in philanthropy, I have a whole lot of space and financial resources to explore, to do the data and the analysis and the systems thinking and the research and interacting with people. But I wouldn't have known that if, you know, as Patton was saying, I didn't realize that, you know, this sector just is not a right fit for me, and deciding to go somewhere different. So I think the most important thing, you know, to hear from the 3 of us so far is figure out what you're passionate about, what gets you up in the morning, and follow that, whatever it is. And if it's not the job, then make sure the job gives you time to do that thing, right? So I think that's what I learned in my early career steps, is to make sure that I was feeling fulfilled as a human, and then everything else kind of fell into place.
What great advice. I wish actually I had gotten this advice when I was an undergrad coming out, and I so admire, Rachel, that you took time off. I went straight to law school from undergrad, and I practiced law for 2 years after graduating, and it wasn't the right path for me. And just coincidentally, most of my best friends from law school are no longer practicing law either. But I went back to grad school and to pursue a PhD in public policy. And that really, I think, to Patton's point, your job experiences are going to help you figure out along the way what's a right fit for you, and also what's not a right fit for you. And so while it's important to get a job, that job, I guarantee you, will not be the last job that you have in your career. And so whether it's firm A or nonprofit B or industry C, it isn't going to matter in terms of your ability to pivot and change career directions. If I look back over my career path, I would say that I've pivoted 3 times and done 3 very, very 180s in my career. Whether it was starting out in law and then pivoting and moving to policy. And after I got my PhD and I wrote my dissertation on the efficiency of capital markets and how not-for-profits access capital. I realized that I wanted to move into the practice of finance rather than the theory of finance. And so I went into, after I got my PhD, I went into investment banking and spent a decade as an investment banker, which was another big pivot for the philosophy major coming out of Northwestern. And after 10 years in banking, I moved into public service and worked at state and local governments, and then pivoted there to my current career, which is as a financial regulator, regulating the financial markets that I was a part of for the prior 20 years. And so I think this is such a good title for a panel, because it should be for all majors without a direct path, because there is no direct path for any of us and for any of you and for anyone in any major. And you will have multiple opportunities to find your footing and to find your career path. It is important to get a job, so go out and get a job, and that job will lead to the next one and will help you figure out where to go.
Absolutely. I love that, Mark. There's no direct path from any of the majors. It's so true. And I'm sure some of the students would be surprised to hear that right now, being in the thick of, college, where so many students are going into certain industries. And so I'm curious, what else has surprised you that, you use in your career today that you learned while a student in Weinberg College? And yeah, we'll start with you, Mark.
Sure. So I'm a huge fan of a liberal arts education. You guys absolutely made the right decision. I have a son who's in college and he's at a small liberal arts college. So I really believe in the value of that. And I think for me, my experience as a philosophy major, it really helped sharpen my analytic thinking. Taking classes like logic and moral reasoning and so on and so forth, it really imparts lifetime skills. The ability to communicate effectively is something that you will need time and time again, and that will help you in your career path. And those, I think, are all the kinds of important skills that you pick up as a liberal arts major. Plus, where else can you, in your life, you will never be able to be exposed to American studies or cognitive science or history and English or philosophy. It is such an amazing opportunity that you guys have to just learn about the world, learn about different perspectives, and that'll shape how you think, how you communicate, how you view the world. And it will actually better equip you to be successful, I think, later in life than narrowly focusing on one particular set of skills during this during this formative time in your guys' life. So I think it is that breadth of experience of having a broad liberal arts education that is probably the most valuable gift that Northwestern gave me.
I agree completely, Mark. I think it's really the skills, and I think Patton summed it up: listen, understand, create relationships with, the basis in really analytical thinking, so you're listening and understanding with an eye towards how can I improve this? What's the missing piece? Where, is the obstacle? And, really troubleshooting and thinking analytically and critically is something you're getting everywhere at Northwestern all the time. Navigating difficult personalities, the social skills that are so incredibly important in the workplace that if you don't have, so going back to this breath I took, I'm not a trust fund baby. I paid to travel the world and picked up all kinds of odd jobs. And so I was a cleaning lady. I picked fruit. It was a really fulfilling experience. And I think it gave me a chance to see more of how the world really works. So the importance of that, like the interpersonal skills and going into settings that maybe you wouldn't otherwise. Also, Mark, I dabbled in philosophy because it was just so interesting and so cool, and decided not to finish the double major. But the logic that I learned was so useful. And I don't do coding. I don't need to write code in my role, but I can read it. I understand it. I get the logic of what's happening. And so in a very technological world now, if you have the opportunity to take a logic class and get some basic grounding, it also helps anywhere you're making an argument, right? Like, does the logic follow? Does it make sense? Or again, is there something critical missing there? So I think that's huge. The other class that was really pivotal for me, and I was just reflecting on it today, is it was taught in combination with Kellogg, and it was an organizational behavior class. And one of the demos I remember so clearly was the early modeling. Again, we're talking early 2000s, and it was a computer program that was modeling, what happens if you put these inputs and then what happens as it plays out. And again, just really foundational information for any place you're stepping into, whether you're doing it in technology or you're watching a system at play. Just understanding, the facets and pieces that make it churn and work or not churn and work.
I think I'm very much in line with what Mark and Rachel are saying. I'm trying to think of a little bit of a differentiation that I can provide here. I think when I was an undergrad, and I was going through my course selection, I had a little feeling of guilt about having all of these really just the most curious offerings that you could possibly imagine from classes. Like, oh, I feel like if I'm going to take a class called Atlantic Encounters, which was literally a class about pirates, right, then I'm going to have to take an econ class to balance that out, right? I'm gonna, I need to keep it academic, really get my money's worth here. And I have to tell you, I remember so many things from that Atlantic Encounters class, and I remember so few things from my econ class. Not to knock econ, I think econ's really important, but that sort of is there was a surprise to me as I got older and thought back on my time at school. The same goes for my graduate studies. I got my master's in international affairs, and I got an MBA as well. And the experiences that stuck with me were always more on the relational side, on the relationship side. It was always, I can remember next to nothing about my managerial accounting class, right? Like, just really, truly in one ear and out the other. But all the classes that I had a chance to interact with my colleagues, with my fellow students, and get into discussions, and learn more about their points of view. One class at Northwestern, I remember I was, it was women in world religion, and I was the only guy in the class, but it was like one of the most interesting classes I took at Northwestern. It was because of the discussions and because of the interactions that I had with those other students and teachers, that taught me how to get outside of my own sort of point of view. And that's really sort of what surprised me. I didn't realize it at the time when I was an undergrad. I didn't even realize it when I was in grad school either, but looking back on it now, it's crystal clear, what that experience taught me.
Yeah, I just love this. It's really wonderful to hear all these conversations. My daughter is about to go off to college. She's not going to Northwestern or wherever to graduate school. She's going to Spelman for a very different experience than I had at Northwestern. But I will say I grew up in the Bay Area in San Jose, California, where race was most of my friends were Asian American, Latino, Black, working class, professional. And that was my world. It was very different from Chicago. I really had to navigate race in a very different way. Socioeconomics, I had to navigate in a very different way. I was very proud that my family we'd saved up and got a motor home. And I never forget, someone was talking very disparagingly about motorhomes when I got to Northwestern. I was like, oh, wow, this is such a different world. So for me, it was navigating privilege and race in a very different context. Chicago is definitely not the Bay Area. So I learned a lot about myself and how to show up and navigate very different socioeconomic dynamics, personalities. I will also say, you know, one thing I really learned is lean on those people who offer themselves up to you for guidance to lean on. And I didn't take full advantage of that at Northwestern. And so when I went to graduate school, I really took advantage of that. So it's something I didn't necessarily seize at Northwestern, but certainly did later. And so, you know, one advice is, if, you know, make those relationships with those professors who show interest in you. There are a few that I still have very good relationships with. But there's one in particular I took is my only graduate school class. And I did not do well. And the professor reached out, and it was on Black feminist theory. And as I told you before, I was just the worst theorist. And I really struggled with writing. And she pulled me aside and, you know, said, like, you really need help with writing. Meanwhile, I thought I was a great writer. And I shut her down because it felt like it was an offense to me. But I took that and really took it to heart. I still think she was wrong. I think I was a pretty decent writer. But I should have really talked to her. What did she see in that? What did she wanted to support me, and I shut her out because it was hard for me to hear. So being open to feedback and, you know, and to those people who show caring, I think is really important.
Absolutely, Myra. I love that message. It's, you know, especially for this group of students who this might be their first interaction with alumni, with Northwestern alumni who are offering, you know, their advice here, offering your advice here today, which is amazing. So I love that. Lean on the people who offer you help. And, you know, another plug for our students here today, connect with these alumni on LinkedIn. They're here to help. They're volunteering their time to offer advice here today, which is excellent. Keep them in your network for the future. You never know how that'll assist you down the road in your future path. And talking about, you know, those career paths, I know we talked a lot here about the arts and science background and how great it is and the things you learned. I'm curious if you can share anything about how you talked about this in interviews, because I've heard this from students before. This is great, hearing the breadth of things you learn. Can you talk about specifically how you talked about those skills for the job you're in now, or maybe a job, you know, right after undergrad? How did you talk about that breadth of experience and those skills you learned from arts and sciences in an interview? And Myra, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. I have to do a lot. So I'm the spokesperson for our organization, for the media, for, you know, testifying on the Hill and whatnot. And so some of that comes with preparation. So just doing your work, you know, being able to say, I can work hard and I'm a quick learner. I have, you know, again, my graduate degree really helped with that, just putting complex ideas, digesting them and putting them out, but also being able to think on your toes and really being able to process information, complex information, and make an argument. You know, Rachel talked about logic and making connections between argumentation. That is so fundamental to my work on many different levels, and especially in policy and advocacy. And so being able to do that, be, you know, a coherent messenger of the work that we do is it comes from being able to read complex ideas and, you know, make sense of them, and, you know, being able to speak publicly is something that I don't know if I had to do at Northwestern, but I feel like it just prepared me, again, that having to think and put together really disparate ideas and come to your own ideas about what they meant, propose different ideas. You know, people need to know that you can think on your toes, that you can write, that you can communicate effectively, and then interpersonal skills are incredibly important in everything that we do. So I don't know how that comes out in an interview, but it's certainly something that I tapped into at Northwestern.
That's all like crucial advice that, you know, is spans the gamut for any interview that you'll ever be in. And the only thing that I can really add to that is, you know, one thing I absolutely learned as an undergrad at Northwestern, being a history major, you know, taking a ton of English classes, is if I wanted to make a good impression in class, if I wanted to, do the work besides writing an excellent paper, participating in class and communicating as part of a discussion. I had to read the content and understand myself through the content, right? I had to really sort of apply what is being discussed into how I viewed it and how it affects me personally. So the work that I did, and I think that I really learned how to do at Northwestern, was to create a narrative that I felt very comfortable, because it's getting to the heart of how I feel about something. And it's very easy to skim a piece of reading and maybe underline a few things and pick out a few important quotations and speak to it. But for the connecting this to the interview question, it's about really taking a hard look at the position that you'd be looking at and how it connects to yourself and your story and your narrative. Because there will be a point during an interview, not every interview, but throughout the course of your career, where you're going to get a question you didn't expect, or you're going to get thrown off balance in some way. And as long as you have that anchor of how the role applies to what you're interested in, is really crucial. And I learned how to do that as an undergrad at Northwestern, not in an interview context, but in the context of interacting in class. So I think just always try to connect it back to yourself. And that way, you never have to think about some story or something. It's not like, something you're trying to memorize. It's a connection to you, and, it's going to come secondhand.
I like both the points that Myra and Patton were making, which, my line is always, Northwestern taught me to think, write, and exist in this world, right? The interpersonal skills that we all know are so important. So the ability to think and write, but the first thing that came to my mind was a level of confidence, like recognizing that you will be graduating from Northwestern, and that carries a lot of street cred. Like that means something. And I think for myself, again, I can't point to the moments, but I'm pretty sure it opened some doors for me having that, on my resume. So that's an important piece. And then I think once you're sitting there in the interview, Patton was saying, bringing it back to you and your narrative. And you're sitting here because you have a skill set that you think applies to the position that you're interviewing for. And so holding on to that, right? Like, don't feel intimidated. Don't feel like, oh gosh, maybe I don't have it. And I tend to surround myself, I think Northwestern is full of a lot of type A perfectionists. And we think that, if we're not, hitting every single mark, we can't possibly be it. And there was some really interesting research that came out that was looking along the gender line of who applies for jobs. And, women, again, I don't remember the exact research, but it was along the lines of, women especially would only apply if they hit, at least 80% of the job description, and men would apply when they only hit 50%. And so that's what I mean about level of confidence. Like, trust that, the little bit that maybe you don't have, you can learn that. It's, oh, I haven't worked in that operating system before, I'm not real, you'll figure it out. But holding on to that confidence and your narrative when you're sitting in that job interview, I think is so important, is to know that the path will unfold, there will be a job, and to just keep trusting that it will come together. But it's really hard not to feel terrified when you're taking those first steps. So hanging on to that, I have a Northwestern degree, I am a highly intelligent person, I just need to find the right fit. And that might take a little time, and that's okay.
Those are all great points. And in fact, I actually interviewed a candidate yesterday for a job at the MSRB, and she did a phenomenal job, and we're extending her an offer today, actually. And so thinking back on the interview that I had with her yesterday, there's no question that one of the most important things that we were looking for is fit. And you were fit within our organization, our culture, our values. Are you someone that I want to work with? Are you someone that I think is going to contribute? And so that is really important. And remember that an interview is two ways. Not only are they interviewing you, but you're interviewing them. Do I want to work with this person who I'm interviewing with? Do I want to work at this company? And so when they give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end, ask questions. What's it like working here? Why are you working here? You know, what keeps you here? You know, so on and so forth. That's your chance to interview them, and you've got to make sure it's the right fit for you. So empower yourself that way as well. The other point that I would emphasize when you're going into an interview is really your narrative, just building on what Rachel said. I really look for, oh, and by the way, I did not ask the candidate, what was your major in undergrad? It doesn't matter. What matters is that narrative. Why did you major in philosophy, or why did you major in American studies? Not that you majored there. What was it about your major that you're passionate about? What drove you to dedicate 4 years to concentrate in this one area? And then whatever that was, can you tie that into why you're applying for this job at my company? And make that connection for them. Have that narrative. This job fits in with my vision for what I want to do and what I want to accomplish in my life. And you don't have to worry about, I've never hired anyone that on day one had all the skills, all the experience, all the knowledge that was listed on the job description that they needed to do the job. In fact, I don't think I've ever stepped into a job where I was actually fully prepared to do that job. You learn it on the fly. You guys are graduating from Northwestern. You're smart enough to pick it up. And so don't worry, it's asking for, you know, XYZ and I never did XYZ. It doesn't matter. You know, what matters is, why are you applying for that job, and can you communicate it? Can you articulate it? Can you make that case for yourself? And I think, you know, that's how you'll distinguish yourself and stand out, I think, in an interview context.
Absolutely. Such great advice and insights from, you know, all of these different industries, even all, you know, talking about the arts and sciences being an asset, which is really great to hear. And I'd love to dive into some student questions, and hopefully, Cole, you sent in a question. I'd love to see if you can turn on your mic and or camera if you're comfortable, and ask our alumni your question. And of course, students, as we're waiting for Cole to turn on her mic and camera, if you have any other questions you'd like me to ask, send those in through the private chat.
Yes. Hi, sorry, I was walking home. So I am a transfer student, and I think that's been a really great part of my experience. But a big part of that is also that I really don't have kind of the time or the opportunity to take classes outside of my major minor. And so I know that you guys are kind of talking about how, you know, sometimes getting the best out of your education isn't necessarily taking all those classes. And I mean, I guess it's not too late to drop like a minor certificate. So if you like recommend doing that and just like pursuing other things, I'd love to hear it. But I also was just wondering how you kind of get the most out of the classes that you're required to take, especially when you can't take the fun ones like the pirate class.
Yeah, sorry, I might have been like a tad flippant with that, and I apologize if it came off like that, because I'm just going to dive in if you guys don't mind, and please, feel free to add on to what I have to say. When you obviously have a list of things that you have to fulfill in order to graduate. It's just a fact, and the fact that you're a transfer, it compresses that, and I feel for you on that one. So, you know, outside of the classes that, you know, are just like, you know, it's going to be down to business on this and there's no room for anything like that. I guess the message is, whether it's my pirate class example or any of the other classes I had, don't feel bashful in being the person that is participating, maybe when somebody else, you know, other students aren't. I've been a person in my life who I feel really awkward when nobody raises their hand to say something. So I'll always be the first person to do that. And I think it served me well. So just, you know, try to, you know, could be something that you don't necessarily think is quote fun, into a little bit more of just a dynamic experience in whichever way you can. And, you know, don't worry about, you know, how people are perceiving it, or, you know, if people think you're
Do we have a freeze here? So it's just me or?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Could you guys hear me?
All the way through.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Patton. And if anyone else has anything we want to add, would love to hear other feedback about taking advantage of classes you have to take.
I would just throw out there, focusing on the interpersonal skill building. So if there's a group you might not usually hang out with in these boring classes, like work on that piece of the learning, because it is so important when you step into a workplace to be able to work with all kinds of personalities, to be aware of different lenses, coming into situations. Right now in philanthropy, there's a big everywhere, obviously, but the DEI movement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the areas that was low-hanging fruit that people have made moves on is the accessibility. So just having transcript notes at the bottom of a Zoom session. So, things like that, so interacting with different kinds of people. So then when you're stepping into your professional place, you can say, well, have you thought about this? Have you attended to this? And then you can be, the voice for change, for movement. And already you're showing your value.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Great, thanks, Cole. And we do have some other student questions coming in that I will get to. And the first one is similar to, the networking question we had discussed, in preparation for the panel. But our students are wondering, how do you network, or how would you approach networking in your industry when you don't know exactly what you want to do? Maybe these students are majoring in English, history, philosophy, American studies, of science right now, and they're not sure what they want to do. How would you approach networking knowing that right now? They don't have their personal narrative fine-tuned. What would you encourage them to do at this point in the networking field? And Myra, maybe we'll start with you, and just a little tidbit of advice would be great.
Yeah, I think one is really come with curiosity and what you want to get out of it. I think there's this push to reach out to a mentor, network, and then it feels like you check a box. But really, this should be something that you want to, you're looking to build a relationship. It should not just be a one-off. And so I would say be selective. This is kind of a flip side of what Mark was saying. Like, when you're in an interview, when you're in these, you have these opportunities, this is really about what you can get out of it. Again, what you can bring to it. I don't want somebody who's just going to milk me dry for information and not have some kind of give and take, but really thinking about this as a relationship, that someone wants to invest in you, and you are presenting a real openness that they want to do that. We are all very busy people. And so making sure that, it will come through if you're doing this because it's really meaningful and you're really hungry for insights. So do your homework as well. Do your homework. Understand what you're talking.
Great. And Rachel, please.
I was just going to jump in and kind of echo what Myra's saying, is that I get a lot from mentoring also. So it really is a two-way conversation. And even if it's not a sector you're interested in or you think you're going to land in, you can learn a lot from someone who's at a different point in their career. So I think, again, approaching it less as this is networking and more about relationship building and just not knowing, where things may take you or what information they might share, or who they might connect you with. Because we're not just talking about a two-way relationship. We're talking about then you have access to that person's network who may know someone that you want to meet. And again, it's not exploitive, as Myra was saying, we're not just sucking for information, but folks who like to be connectors, I find a lot of joy in doing this. I find a lot of joy in helping other people along on their journey. And I tend to have people who are mentoring me who feel the same way, who just want to see me grow and learn and contribute. That's the other really big thing, is that as we're growing each other, I think, again, Myra said it best because she really has this nonprofit passion, is that we want to see the answer to these questions. And if we're not going to be the ones to answer it, we want to make sure that we've got lots of people thinking about these questions or connecting other people who are thinking about these questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for answering that question and these great insights. I'm so glad we're here with you all today. And we have a couple questions from students that are a little similar. One student's asking, what would you tell yourself at the beginning of your undergraduate career? And another student had asked, if you can give us one piece of reassurance, what would it be? So maybe tying these two things together, if any of you wanna raise your hand, feel free. Great, Mark.
Sure. So the piece of advice that I would give myself is one that I received from a mentor, and that I've thought about over and over throughout my career, and really come to appreciate it now that I'm, deeper in my career than when I first received the advice. But it was, take risks with your career. It's yours, and pursue what you love. Bet on yourself. Don't hitch your wagon to somebody else's star. Be your own advocate and believe in yourself, and take risks with your career. There isn't a right or a wrong answer. There isn't one path for you. And so it's okay to go into a job that you think is the right one, and then you realize, actually, this isn't the right one for me. And then you will pivot and you will find a better job. So take those risks and really jump in with both feet.
Great, I love it. And oh, Patton, would you like to add anything?
Just very quickly on top of that, I spent too much time comparing myself to my peers in a lot of ways. Because you will have peers, you will have friends that do have that path, whether it's like a chosen path or whether it's a passion that they are just, that burns within them. That's great. That's awesome for them. But don't judge yourself too harshly against folks that you come up with that have that, because if you don't, it just means that you're going to gather a diversity of experiences, and those diversity of experiences, both positive and negative, inform so many great things later on. So just don't spend too much time judging yourself harshly if you don't feel that connection or that burning path.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add, really push yourselves, and I don't know where you all are, if you're freshmen, seniors, or anything in between, but push yourselves to get to know people who you never would have had an opportunity to meet outside of college. I mean, that is the amazing thing about a college experience, is you are thrust together with people from all over the world who are coming for different reasons. And so really take advantage of that, because it's just extraordinary, the kind of learning that can happen that would be something you would carry with you, and it wouldn't necessarily be a lifelong relationship, or those lifelong relationships that are created in this context. So really do that. And I would also say travel. I did not know that there was travel abroad was something that you could take advantage of at Northwestern. I really missed the boat on that. So when I went to graduate school, I took every opportunity to have my graduate education be paid for to go travel abroad. But I'm sure you guys are already doing that, but that's one thing. So other thing I would advise.
And my little sound bites of reassurance are that you will find a job. I mean, without question, you will find a job. And then, piggybacking on what Mark was saying, is take a risk, and the goals will change. So if the goal is, I need a job, that will change after your first year there. You'll decide, okay, I don't just need a job. I want to feel excited when I wake up. I want to like the people I work with. And so, whatever the goal is, or the sense of urgency, be ready to take the risk, understand that the goal has shifted, but you will certainly, without a doubt, find a job.
This is great. Thank you all so much. And I know we've reached our time. We have some students whose questions we didn't get to. Annie and Emma, I'm sorry we didn't get to your questions, but of course, we're going to share out contact information after. So if you want to reach out, I would encourage you to stay connected. And of course, our alumni speakers, thank you so much. This has been so great hearing your insights, advice, stories, experiences that were impactful. So thank you for being here. And students who are on the line, we typically buy you all lunch while you're on campus for these events. We can't do that right now, so we're going to send you a Grubhub gift card so you can take advantage of that in the next couple of weeks. So again, thank you everyone for being here today. Thanks our alumni, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Go Cats.